Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another great day in terms of the Chamber's annual conference. We are continuing our conversation today in this panel, focusing on the business of the Chamber of Commerce and Advocacy. Yesterday, we had a great discussion that kind of teed up this discussion, and the main takeaway in terms of the Chamber's ability to impact policy is that the Chamber is too large to fail. We have a very distinguished panel with us, and we're going to get right to it. I'd like the panelists to do a quick introduction. One quick note, I just noticed the extensive experience of the panel. I think combined there's over 80 years of advocacy. I know that Brenna really lowers that average because she's only been doing this she's not that old to do all this, what I'm saying. But with that, if we can please start off with Brenna, just quick introductions.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Jose. My name is Brenna Butler Garcia. I am the Vice President of Community Relations for AG Spanos Companies, located and based in Stockton, California. I'm also, until about an hour ago, I was the Central Region Director of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce. I have termed out in that role, but my good colleague, Sylvester Aguilar, is taking that on. And I'm also a board member of the San Joaquin County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, where I'm a former CEO. So good morning.
Good morning. Mayor Zaragoza, if you can, quick introduction. Mayor, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Maybe he's having audio problems.
Yeah, maybe Bob. Oh, there we go.
I'm back. Sorry, if you can repeat, I was having hearing, not being able to hear.
Yeah, if you just want to do a quick introduction, Mayor, that'd be great, or else I can do it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me here this morning. Yes, I'm the mayor of the city of Placerville.
Mm-hmm.
Just some quick audio issues. Basically said he's amazing. He has more than 20 years experience. He is accountable to every single constituent in his city. So thank you for joining us. And Bob, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yes, thank you, Jose, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Bob Gutierrez. I'm the chairman of the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I also serve as a past president of the San Joaquin Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I am the interim president CEO of the San Joaquin Partnership and Economic Development Corporation. And I also have my own small business, BG Strategies, a public affairs firm. And I have 20 years experience in working in politics, and I look forward to the discussion today and sharing some of our shared knowledge and practices here for our members. So thank you.
Great. I'll start off with a couple of questions, and then we're going to go into Q&A. As you know, we're in an unprecedented year in terms of, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the wildfires, whether it's $50 billion economic hit. We are seeing drastic need to come up with real recommendations next year in terms of economic recovery, in terms of maintaining the viability of our business chambers. As such, today's discussion is how can we better advocate? How can we really use kind of the breadth and depth of the chambers to effectively move an agenda locally, statewide, maybe even federally? So the first question then is a simple question. What does advocacy mean for the Chamber of Commerce? And maybe we'll start off with Brenna.
Yeah, I think that advocacy for a Chamber of Commerce is probably the single most important component to a chamber. That is literally why business organizations like this exist. And I think their ability to effectively advocate on behalf of their membership, whether it's at the local level or state or federal, is really critical to their survival. Most of the members that make up a chamber of commerce are small business members. They don't have retained lobbyists on their payroll. They don't have government affairs specialists. And so they rely on the expertise of the chamber and the services that they're providing to make sure that whether it's City Hall or the state capitol, that those legislators and policymakers are hearing about the issues that they're faced with in their businesses.
Great, thank you, Brenna. Mayor Zaragoza, do you want to expand? He might still be having audio issues. Bob, would you want to weigh in a little? Oh, let me see. Yeah, we're still having audio issues. Bob, do you want to weigh in on the question as soon as he?
I think you're muted, Bob.
Thank you. Well, again, I'll say that I appreciate what Brenna said in terms of the impacts and it being the single most important function of a chamber of commerce. Over the last 10 years being a part of a local chamber, I can tell you it's been interesting to see how businesses have evolved, especially for us in San Joaquin County, in their engagement. And that's been a big practice of us locally. And I think that's kind of where it starts. If you have an understanding of how local government works, you'll have a better understanding on how state government works and the federal government works. But at the end of the day, like they say, all politics is local. And I think that by getting engaged locally, you'll have a better understanding of how important it is to be knowledgeable about the impacts to your small businesses, and then applying those impacts, from a resource standpoint as a chamber. So it's just as important as a chamber realizing the importance of its function, but it's also equally important for its members to understand that that's a resource that they have available to them.
No, thank you, Bob. Right on. Mayor Zaragoza, if you want to weigh in on the question, what does advocacy mean for the Chamber of Commerce? And I think it's a mute. And thank you, everyone, in terms of the new normal being virtual and putting up with some of the technical issues. We'd love to have this live and seeing everyone's participation. But as we experience some of these technical issues, we want to, again, thank you for your patience. Mayor Zaragoza, are you still able
to? Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just having some difficulties over on this end. For me, advocacy, and I'm going to come at it from a slightly different perspective, because I'm usually coming to the chamber from a client perspective. And so we know whether it's a nonprofit, a small business, or a corporation, the one thing that we're looking for in terms of advocacy is for a chamber to be able to talk to their local chamber, to their local city council or their school board or to the legislature. And so that's always, I think, an important value added when it comes to a chamber, whether it's a state chamber or a local chamber, and having that advocacy function. A lot of companies, it's great to have the mixers and things like that, and maybe build up that local name ID. But especially for the corporations, they're really looking for that partner that can speak on their behalf when they may have an issue at the local level, or whether it's at the state level. And I think that's such an important thing, advocacy for chambers to be able to offer that to all levels, to all size, whether it's a small, business in that's a member of theirs that maybe is having trouble with the zoning issue with the local city council, to a chamber having an issue with legislation.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think all of you alluded to this in terms of the chamber's bread and butter is local. But let's expand that a little bit in terms of how can we use that local presence to better impact regional, maybe state. So what are some ideas? What are some best practices that you might recommend in terms of how to leverage that? Maybe we'll start off with Brenna.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, chambers represent the interests of business, right? Small or big. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to do business in California, and I think that what the chambers can do is really put a local face to the issues that businesses are experiencing. And I think that it becomes critical when you have policymakers, particularly at the state level, that are instituting policies where they don't have a background in business, and maybe they haven't heard what the significant impacts to their policies are going to be on small or large businesses. It's important for them to meet with somebody face to face and to really understand what those impacts are. And that's what a chamber can provide. A chamber can be that connector. I think yesterday I was on a session where we talked about chambers are the conveners and the connectors. And I really think that that is our job, to connect the policymakers with the businesses so that they can really understand the impacts of the policies that they're instituting.
That makes perfect sense. And Mayor, maybe use two of your hats. One definitely in terms of the business one, but also being a mayor in terms of being accountable for some of the constituents, some of the local businesses. What are some recommendations you have in terms of how the local chamber can effectively influence regional state policy?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is an important voice. I mean, I know, we're in the mayor hat. We don't have a Hispanic chamber in El Dorado County, but we have a couple of other small chambers in our area, and their voice is incredibly important, because a lot of times, I mean, what we've discovered is, and I'll use our main street in Placerville as a good example, is, these people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, maybe more. And so they don't always have the time to come and talk to the city council or talk to a legislator about an issue that's affecting them. And so they rely upon that chamber voice to be their voice, when they're coming forward. So whether that's at city council. And so we have a great relationship with our local city council. When they come and tell us, hey, look, you're doing this and we don't think this is a great idea for our area, or can you do more of this? Whether it's an encroachment permit, whatever it might be, that voice is important to us, because we know that those businesses don't have always the time to be able to come out and advocate on their own behalf. So they're going to be able to do it. And so I think with the Hispanic chambers, it's the same thing. It's having that voice. And I remember it was probably a few conventions ago for the Hispanic Chamber, but and I won't name names, but there was a legislator that came and said, hey, I've never actually signed the front of a check before, and so I really don't have a lot of understanding of what you all were doing. And I thought it was a really honest answer, but it showed the importance of the California Hispanic Chamber and the regional chambers about, as Brenna said, I mean, there's a lot of folks that have never had business experience. And so it's really up to the chambers to help educate them and to give that human face to a business, so that it's not just a number, and it's not just, the Walmarts of the world. It's, this little shop that's on, in a corner in Stockton somewhere, that may be affected just like a Walmart, and probably a lot more, because Walmart could absorb something, whether, but maybe not so much, a little small mom and pop store. So I think that's, hugely important to be able to do, and provide that human face, especially to when we have a lot of legislators that haven't necessarily worked in the business world.
That makes perfect sense. And Bob, maybe use your chairman's hat to talk about, strength in numbers. I think that we heard a great examples of kind of how the chamber can use their individual presence, but now the California Chamber can also coordinate some of that advocacy. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Absolutely. And I think the answers that you've heard already are just the thing that gets it started right at the state level. And so if you've got the local presence, the local support, the local understanding, and they're able to bring those faces together, those small business faces, the ones that do sign the front of a check, up to Sacramento, and work with organizations like the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to help coordinate that and really focus in on solutions with legislators, whether it be here in California or in Washington, D.C. The strength in numbers. When we have our legislative day at the Capitol, we have representation from all our regions, all 4 of our regions, and all our chambers throughout the state. And it's an amazing sight to see everybody go in there. And we don't go in with 1 or 2 members at a time. We're going in there with 8 members. And those are 8 small business representatives, 8 local chamber representatives that are advocating for their businesses. And they're giving their real stories to the legislators that, as the mayor indicated, probably haven't signed the front of a check and don't realize the implications of some of the decisions that they make. But the more that, the locals able to tell their story, and the more that we're able to provide that opportunity for them, the more successful we're going to be in reaching those legislators to change policy and start coming up with, policy that makes sense for business. When we do something large, we need to realize that has a multi-effect at the local level in small businesses. So we need to tell that story, and we're here to do that with you.
That's great, Bob. Following up on that, in terms of, you build a rapport with the elected. What are recommendations to maintaining that political influence or expanding that political influence? Brenna? I think you're still on mute, Brenna.
Sorry. I think it really starts with the relationships that you're going to have with folks in your district, right? So, I think the mayor mentioned earlier, it's nice to go to mixers and to have those kinds of social events, but use those kinds of events as a platform to develop those kinds of relationships, because really what you need for your regional elected officials to understand is that the chamber is there not only as an advocate for our business members, but the chamber exists to be a resource for them as well. And so they need to know that they can rely on the chamber for honest, straightforward feedback when it comes to the policies that they're considering instituting. And they need to know that the chamber is a source for that information. So I think that that's one of the best ways that you can start, is right with the elected officials in your own district. And then it's about continuing those relationships. We all know that there's folks at the city council level that may progress in their careers. Eventually they're going on to state level or federal level politics. And it's important that you're maintaining those relationships throughout the years, because I think that's really where you can continue to provide that feedback and experience and guidance that you're receiving from your business members.
That's a great point. We always hear the term farming in the sense of the elected officials at the school board level, at the city council member level. They'll look for another position. They might be the next assembly member, the next senator, etc. So that's a great point in terms of building upon the relationship. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, Mayor Zaragoza, in terms of, you see it firsthand, some of the businesses in your city. What are some best practices in terms of maintaining that relationship and also increasing that relationship with a city elected?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Brenna touched on a lot of good points in her comments. It really is that sort of caring and feeding, I think, that's so important to have that long-term relationship from the chamber's perspective with the elected official. And it does work both ways. Not only do you want to advocate to the legislator or to the city council, but you also want the council member or the legislator to come back to you and say, hey, we're looking at this issue. What do you think? Is this something that's going to be positive for your members, or is this going to be something that, maybe there's an issue? And I think that's when you really have a good relationship with that person, that's a decision maker, because you're not only going to them, they're coming to you. And I think that's an important part of the relationship to build. And part of that too is I think there's ways to be able to enhance that as well. It's like, maybe come tour this trucking business that's in my district, or come talk to this small group of businesses that are over here doing technology or something else. And so they also understand the value added from the elected officials' perspective as to the different groups and the perspectives that are out there, and then their ability just to talk to their own constituents. And the chamber is really the vessel that helps make that happen, because again, you go back to people being so busy in their everyday lives that they may not think about that, but they may love to have a legislator come out and tour their trucking facility or their other, their other business to really show what's going on and how maybe a decision they're making is not necessarily helping them very much. And so that facilitation is a great way, I think, for the chamber to be able to enhance their advocacy and their worth to their membership as well.
No, that's great. Great point in terms of making sure you're a value add. I mean, you don't always want to be that company that goes to an elected asking for things at the nth hour, always and always. I mean, I'm sure that only goes so far. So maybe, Bob, you can expand a little bit on that in terms of continuing to be a value add for the elected as an effective advocacy strategy.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've done at the local level, I'll kind of talk a little about state level and local level, but the local level, we instituted a candidates forum, electeds forum, and a mixer all in one. And it was a great opportunity for our members to get to know their local legislators, their local council members, their local school board members. And they were each one able to share kind of what their experience had been either working with the chamber or how we could work together in the future. So those are unique opportunities that we should be taking advantage of at the local level. And it can be a model for other areas that maybe aren't as aware of the importance of this type of effort and what the significance is in having those type of events. So you can make it fun at the same time as making it educational as well as making it impactful. And I think that's one of the things that we need to realize, as small businesses, that this whole process isn't as scary as it's made out to be, that we see all the time, maybe in the media or read in the paper or hear horror stories about. It's really an opportunity to cultivate relationships and make sure that we continue them forward, and always feel free to be able to share not only our experiences, but the impacts that we're taking on as small business owners. So I think that's really important that we continue those efforts. At the state level, as we continue to build capacity at the local level, that only makes us stronger at the state level. So we want to have those local faces, those local resources. We want to know that you've cultivated those local relationships with elected officials. Because to the mayor's and Brenna's point, you don't know what office they're going to seek next. Today they're a school board member, tomorrow they're a council member, next they're a supervisor, and then they're off to the state or federal house. So these are really important cultivations that need to take place. And I think one of the other things is that we need to remember is that, today's conflict is possibly tomorrow's opportunity. Just because we don't agree on something today doesn't mean we won't be able to agree on something later. So really maintaining those relationships and knowing that it's about education and awareness and always putting a face to it that's going to have an impact to the issue.
Great points, Bob. And definitely on the mixers, hopefully the mixers are live. I don't know about these virtual mixers in terms of, it makes sense, but having a drink in virtual, I don't know about that. All of you mentioned, though, a little bit about kind of the political aspect. I've been doing this for 22 years. When I first started, it was about 90% policy. It was a great idea. The policy was sound, and yet I was frustrated that it didn't move forward, that people weren't listening. And then I understood more the political aspect in terms of some of the fundraising, some of the things that go behind the scenes. At the end of the day, the electeds are trying to be electeds. They're always thinking about that next race. They're always thinking about what's going to happen. If they're local elected, they're charting out the next 12 years in terms of what might open up. As such, political action committees, we hear about them. Can maybe you expand a little bit in terms of PACs and how chambers should be thinking about PACs? Maybe we'll start off with Brenna.
Okay, so to me, the PACs are really where the rubber meets the road for our businesses. I think that this is something that a lot of small businesses aren't used to participating in. I think it's also something that a lot of chambers and their networks are not necessarily used to or comfortable in. And I think that's really something that we need to change. I think the small business community and the minority communities need and deserve to be heard. And one of the best ways that we can do that is by instituting a PAC and and requiring our members to just really put their money where their mouth is. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to create real change, whether you're doing it at the local level or you're doing it at the state level. This is where you get to support the candidates that are building sensible policies. And this is where you get a chance to really make sure that everybody is clear on where you stand on an issue. And I think that it's so important for us to invest in this. I think so many small businesses and kind of within our own communities, we're excited about buying stuff all the time. We're always buying stuff. But if we really want to invest in ourselves, let's invest by putting forward political candidates that are going to make sense for us to continue doing business in California.
Definitely. And then a lot of times, at least in the Capitol, we see kind of some of the major players. I mean, we hear about teachers unions. We hear about whether it's unions, whether it's the corrections. And guess what? They have very large PACs. So following up on that, Mayor Zaragoza, can you talk a little bit about kind of PACs and how they impact advocacy?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, CTA, Chamber, the California Chamber of Commerce, a lot of these larger organizations have large political action committees that, definitely, I think, helps open up doors for them on the policy side. And so it's incredibly important, I think, at the local level as well as here at the CHCC to have that PAC as well. And I think it also it makes people want to come speak to you as well. Like even at the local level, if the San Leandro Chamber of Commerce has a PAC, they're probably going to make an endorsement and they're probably going to maybe send a check your way potentially as well. And so it's an extra incentive, I think, for candidates, whether at the local level, county or state and federal, to come want to seek out your support as well. Because if they don't think you're going to get an endorsement or there's not a check, sometimes they'll be like, well, why am I going to go talk to them about an issue? There's no upside to it. That's just a reality that a lot of legislators and I think elected officials are actually going to contemplate. So it's sort of the harsh realities of politics. And just, one thing I wanted to say, because I thought Bob made an excellent point in the last question, which is, you never know when you're going to work with somebody again. And so I always say, never burn bridges with an organization or with an elected official, because you might be opposed on 90% of issues, but there might be 10% that you agree on, and what you disagree with today may bring you together, tomorrow. And so what I've noticed in my 20 plus years working around the legislature and governor's office and on the advocacy side is, always keep those relationships, be respectful and allow yourself to agree to disagree sometimes, but be able to come back and work together on a different issue. And I just wanted to underscore that because I thought Bob made such a terrific point there. It's something that, a lot of people forget sometimes, and it's very difficult to rebuild that relationship.
And investing in campaigns is also building a relationship. It means that you want to work with that elected to make sure that they're elected again. So Bob, same question in terms of PAC and advocacy, but maybe with a little twist. I mean, we mentioned CTA, we mentioned large chambers with large PACs. I mean, in Sacramento, a large PAC is over $200,000. You hear some that have maybe $1 million. But doing quick math, I mean, I think we have over 43,000 chamber members in California. Is that right? And so if each one gets $10, that's a $430,000 PAC. If everyone gets $30, that's a $1.2 million PAC. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And first, let me thank the mayor for his comments. I appreciate that. And, one of the biggest impacts we can have rather than policy in a relationship is a political action committee. As Brenna said, that is where the rubber meets the road. And that happens at the local level and the statewide level. And really, the twist is, and I think Brenna mentioned this earlier, is making our members more familiar with the investment in ourselves and the impact and the possibilities when one does that. To your point about how much money there is to be raised with our collective network, it's amazing what we could do. We've got over 90 chamber affiliates and chambers, throughout the state. And if each one of them gave $1,000, we would be just short of 100,000, just like that overnight. We did a cash call with our board members just about 60 days ago, and within 24 hours, we had $6,000 raised amongst our board. So really, the true point here is that we need to be better investors in our future. And if we're going to get the attention of the decision makers, both in Sacramento and locally and in Washington, we need to invest and realize that our opportunity starts with a relationship. It continues with being able to support candidates that can win. And then it comes to being able to share our message. Those are the three single most important things that we can be doing. And I think that the gap right now is that for so long, we've watched other organizations kind of carry that torch and kind of been dependent on that. And what we need to realize is the importance of the small business face being on that. One of the biggest things that I will be proud of at the end of this year when we've raised money from all our local PACs is they'll all be small business owners. And that is a huge message. Going back to our original conversation about writing the front end of a check, they're not only running the front end of a check for their business daily, but now they're doing it to a political action committee. And that is what gets reported. So when those members look at those filings, they see a bunch of small businesses writing those checks. And that's going to send a message. So that's the twist, I think, that we're offering our members and that we're looking to do in the future.
Thank you, Bob. No, that makes perfect sense. In this discussion about advocacy, in the discussion about building relationships, there's also some faux pas, some things that you should definitely watch out for. I think that all of you alluded that, you want to maintain those relationships even when you disagree. So as we talk about chamber advocacy, what's some advice that you might want to give in terms of some of the do's and don'ts to make sure that you build upon that relationship? Brenna?
Yeah, I think you guys really spoke on this earlier, but I think that all of us work in government affairs in some capacity, right? And I think that we all understand that it takes years to build relationships and it takes minutes to unravel them. So really to address your policymakers from a standpoint of respect, to understanding that we won't always see eye to eye, but learning how you can, I think Bob said earlier, learning how you can look for solutions is really the best advice that we can give. It's not always comfortable, but it is something that's it's necessary. And first and foremost, our chambers are advocates for their members. So it's important that you always look at it through that lens whenever you're having a conversation with a policymaker. And at the same time, it's important to remember where they're coming from, and they represent far more than just the constituency than maybe your chamber does. So it's important to remember that their position includes many difficult decisions as well.
Thank you, Brenna. Mayor Zaragoza?
Yes, I think, from my experience, there's one rule that I've always lived by when it comes to advocacy, and that is, when you give your word or on something, stick to it. And so, if you say you're going to oppose a piece of legislation or support a piece of legislation, don't show up at a committee hearing later and have a directly opposite position to what you told somebody. It's the quickest way to, I think, burn relationships and also to not be seen as a trustworthy source. So, you can always agree to disagree on something. And I think I've always respected people that, if they say, hey, look, I can't support you on this. And that's fine. We're not going to agree on everything. But, if you intimate or even tell someone, hey, we're going to support you, and then later you find out that a letter's been sent in that opposes that thing, that's bad. And so I think that's a big faux pas to avoid. And, if you don't have enough information to make an informed decision at the time, say that. And say, let me do some more research, as opposed to maybe saying right away, well, we'll support that or we're opposed, because maybe your board doesn't want to do that, after further discussion. And so I think that's a real important thing to do, because not only from, I think, the elected officials' perspective, but also for the people that are part of your organization, that they know that if you're going to say something, that's either what you're going to do, or unless there's a lot of new information that it would change your mind. So that's one, if I had one piece of advice to give, that would be it.
That's great advice. Again, I mean, we want to make sure we're trusted sources of information. So I think that's right in that same vein. Bob?
Yeah, so I share all those same thoughts. And I think one of the things that you can do at the local level and that we do at the state level is with our Government Affairs Committee, we try to diversify that with a number of different industry representatives and small business representatives. To the mayor's point, being informed before you speak and before you take a position is critical. You never want to be on the wrong side of history or an issue without knowing what the consequences are. And the more diverse you have of a board that understands those issues, and professionals that are engaging in that space, a part of your board, the more informed you're going to be, and the more your actual board is going to be able to be confident in making the decisions that they do. And that goes for the local level and the statewide level. We're blessed to have a diverse makeup of our board at the state level from around the state and our different regions, but we all represent different businesses as well in different industries. And so that really helps when we come together to make these types of decisions. It increases our awareness and education on the issue, but it also helps us make a concerted effort to make sure that we are making the right decision when we make a policy decision or a support or a political. So that's one thing that I would say is that, make sure that you have folks that are in the space of government relations that understand the issues, that can educate your board and your committees on those issues before you make decisions.
Thank you, Bob. I think looking at time, I'm getting a note that we should transition over to Q&A, if that's okay with everyone. Again, thank you very much for the panel discussion. I think it's been amazing in terms of conveying importance of growing the relationship with the decision maker. 3, political action committee, making sure that we're aware what it is and the benefits. And then 4, as we go out there and advocate kind of some of these do's and don'ts. We're gonna open it up to a couple of the questions. And then I think we have one quick question just came in. Topical question. What is the best way to communicate to an elected official during a pandemic, since you can't really knock on their door and come in? Brenna.
Yeah, so this has changed the game a bit. We found both locally and at the state level, I'm on Zoom calls daily, and I think that's just the world we live in right now. I think it's great to be able to see people's faces when you communicate with them. Bob and I have often talked about, because of the work that we do, so much of it is based on relationships, and so much of that is a visual, right? And you don't even realize it until you don't have it anymore. And so I think it's really important to make sure that you're finding time throughout your day to sit down and have those one-on-ones with your electeds, or perhaps invite them to a Zoom call with your GR committee. Those are all great ways to make sure you're connected with them.
Thank you, Brenna. Mayor Zaragoza?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a struggle for me as well in terms of hearing from people and during the pandemic. I mean, we've been a little bit blessed in El Dorado County that just due to density, we've had the ability to, go to a restaurant and maybe sit across from somebody in a way that, in a lot of other areas you're not able to do. So I've been able to do a little bit of in person, but still, I think the majority of how I've communicated with people has been via Zoom, WebEx, different online platforms to be able to talk to people. But I look at all my emails. I mean, I don't. A lot of times in the bigger cities, it may be staff that are doing that first intercept with the elected official. Certainly at the legislative level and federal, but certainly I know I go through all my emails. I send back personal emails to everybody that sends a note to me and try to get to those. There's a lot that goes through. So give folks a few days, I think, and I always give a week rule with elected officials to get back to me, and then I kind of follow, unless it's like an emergency thing, and then I'll kind of bug them a little bit more. But, like in my case, we have our phone numbers listed in the newspaper. My cell phone number is on there, so people in my community can reach out to me pretty much anytime, or text. I think text, if you know your legislator or your city council member, can sometimes be working really well. So even if they're busy, they can look down at their, they can get their phone, look at it real quickly, and send you a quick note back, and with your questions. So if you have a number, give them a text, and see if you can get a quick response to them. But all of those different ways, I think, are going to be effective during the pandemic. And even a letter, even if you want to send in, old fashioned, I kind of like that sometimes, actually, and get something in the mail. And then, what I'll usually do is respond to them back on email if they sent me that. If not, I'll stick something in the mailbox and get back to them as well.
Great. Mr. Gutierrez, I know that throwing a fundraiser is always a great way to get a hold of them, but another idea of how to interact with them.
Yeah, no, I certainly think that we've learned a lot about different platforms for interaction over technology. I didn't know there were so many until we got into this pandemic. But, I think the biggest way that we can do this is continue to, have that face-to-face. As Brenna and the mayor both mentioned, it's critically important to be able to see our legislators. I too text a lot with our members because it's a quick way to check in or find out what's going on during a particular matter, without having to pick up the phone, or because we can't be in the halls up here in Sacramento or in most the city or county buildings either. Just recently, we started being able to do that on a limited basis. So I think it's really important that you stay in tune to watching those board meetings, even though they're remote, and typing in your answers. I know it's difficult sometimes, but those are opportunities that need to be on the record. And I think that's one of the unfortunate parts about a pandemic is that you don't have as much engagement, citizen engagement or business engagement, especially at the local level. If you hear public comments, at those hearings and so forth at the local level, you don't have as much people typing in or phoning in as you would people coming in and saying, this is what's happening to me as a result of this. So I think that's one of the misses that we're having right now. I think that people are becoming incredibly more aware of the importance to actually do that, though. And I think that as chamber leaders, we should be advocating for our members to be doing that more, which means we need to organize them more to do that and give them the platform to do that as well. So I think that's something we can do better at. When it comes to fundraising, gosh, I've attended a few fundraisers now over Zoom, and it's a little different. We had our Tito's reception the other night via Zoom, and that was an experience. But, you still try to do what you can, and, to create those relationships and be impactful and have the face-to-face. And you got to just kind of press through this right now. And at one point, we'll get back to doing the in-persons. But in the meantime, got to take advantage of the platforms, got to take advantage of continuing those relationships, because it's all important at the end of the day.
Perfect. Thank you. Quick question on PACs. Most PACs are nonprofits, C6 versus C4. There's a fine line. How can local chambers participate in the PAC process without losing some of their tax exemption? So
I think one of the best ways that they can is participating with the CHCC PAC. I think that's a great vehicle for our local chambers to utilize right now. Even if you there's no need for you to go and open up your own PAC, especially when you're focused on other things. What you can do right now is you can raise money and contribute to the CHCC PAC, and you can provide direction on how you want those funds utilized. So you can have a voice at the table. We extended an opportunity to local chambers, and Bob mentioned it. If they just raise $1,000 from their board, they can provide a representative to sit in those committee meetings and participate. So I think that's the easiest way to do that.
Perfect. That makes sense in terms of utilizing the existing structure. Mr. Gutierrez or Mayor?
Yeah, I'll take a crack. There's no. I think the question was, is there incompatibility with being a C6 and having a PAC? There's not. Whether you're a C6 or a C4, there's not the PAC sort of a separate entity. So you'd have a board of directors for your PAC. And so while you're sort of married, you're also a little separated so that there's not a conflict of interest. And I'm sure the CHCC would give some guidance to you locally about setting up that PAC so that is done correctly. But I know, from dealing with working with different organizations in the past, certainly you have the ability to do that and set up that local PAC so that you have that opportunity too, or as Brenna said, to work directly and sit on the, the CHCC PAC as well.
That makes sense. Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, I'll just emphasize the fact that the importance of PACs and being engaged in them, and that you do have two opportunities, both at the state level with our PAC, but also the ability to create one at the local level as well. So don't be afraid of getting engaged in that space and raising the dollars to be impactful, because you'll never get an opportunity to do that if you don't get started with the first step.
That makes sense. And a similar question was just asked in terms of some of the chambers as part of their charter to be nonpartisan. So how are they going to be able to participate in the endorsement of a candidate without kind of going against that charter?
Yeah, I think that that's a perfect example of just like the mayor explained, having that PAC is really a separate entity and provides that separation that you need. So it still allows you to participate without it being a direct reflection of the chamber's activities.
Perfect. Any other answers before I go to the next question? Mayor? Yes.
Yeah, same. I mean, pretty much what Brenna said. It doesn't make you partisan to make an endorsement in a race. Especially at the local level where there's no partisan affiliation with the races. But even when you have a partisan office, your endorsement is coming from the business perspective, and that's not partisan. It's just about what's going to be best for businesses or for your community. Whether that person is a Democrat, Republican, or decline the state, you're looking at it from the perspective of what's going to be best for your community and business community. And so that's your reflection on it, not as a political party or something else.
And a lot of time that's reflected in a questionnaire or a standard format to kind of address those issues. That it's not a partisan thing, it's an issue-based thing. Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, no, I think the mayor nailed it, and so did Brenna, in terms of, set a mission and a focus, and that way you keep yourself out of the fray. I think those are those critical things that you could do in order to stay safe there. But yeah, great answer.
Perfect. Another question. We are a local chamber starting out. We're beginning our conversations with the members of the legislature. What should we do to not mess up or cause long-term damage?
I liked this one. And I understand it can be scary, as a new chamber and starting to engage with elected officials. I think it's important to remember that they are people just like you, and most of them, the vast majority of them, are all involved in public service because they want to better their communities, just like you do. And so I think starting the conversation from that place is important. There are some formal things. For instance, you wouldn't ever want to mix a conversation where you're talking to an elected official in their official capacity and then having a conversation about fundraising in the same setting. That's definitely not appropriate. You would never want to do that in the building. So being cognizant of those kinds of things is important.
Definitely. Mayor?
Yes, no, Brenna hit you. That's exactly right. Never mix policy discussions with fundraising discussions. Definitely a no-no. So that's a good point to underscore. And I think at the local level as well, a lot of council members, mayors, what have you, and even legislators, they've been, as Brenna said, involved in a ton of things, and so they may even be helpful. Maybe they could introduce more if you're having a membership issue. They may be able to provide you with other folks that may be like-minded and want to join, or introduce you to other folks in the area. A lot of times there's partnerships with cities and chambers, and so there could be even potential funding that comes through a city or a county into a chamber of commerce. So, have those relationships. Reach out, say what you're going to be doing, with your locals first, and then I would kind of go out from there. But certainly, there's no harm in being you and going out and talking to those elected officials. I think they'd be happy to sit down and work with you.
Perfect. Mr. Gutierrez, I know an answer is to hire a great PR firm that's already out there. I mean, that's one thing they can do. But another answer.
Exactly. Not a business pitch. No. One of the things I'll say is that just be prepared. Know what you want to go in for. We call it the ask. Know what your ask is going to be. And that only comes from the awareness of the issue and kind of the points. So if you want to stay out of the fray and not create long-term damage, be prepared and knowledgeable of the issues that are important to you and your membership, and then develop a strategy on how to convey that message to the member and make an ask. What is it that you want out of the meeting, out of the result of what's going on? What do you expect, and what are they going to expect? I think if you set realistic expectations, then you'll continue to foster those conversations long-term without creating any damage long-term.
Great. Again, I just got noticed that we have to wrap up. We can continue with this conversation. There's a couple more questions. I mean, with my experience with the chamber, I just see such a great trajectory in terms of evolution, in terms of impact. One of the questions I wanted to get at in terms of diversity is top of mind. I mean, there's a big difference between the California chamber and the Hispanic chamber in terms of breadth, depth, and impact and connection with the community. So lots of great opportunities. But I want to thank all the panelists for taking time on this Friday, 11 o'clock morning, brunch time. And definitely we'll make sure that you're available for additional questions. And please don't leave. So, okay, sorry. I'm trying to multitask. Thank you again. This is amazing. Hope to engage more of the members in terms of getting engaged through advocacy, through PAC. I'm sure that as a chamber, we'll reach out, provide examples, practices, toolkits. And with that, I want to say thank you. And thank you to everyone joining us.
Thank you.